unless you have a particular question or request. So let me give you a little overview of today. I'm going to go through some principles. I guess I'm going to be talking more than I usually do in book completion groups. I'm going to give you some tools for working with other people. If you want to form your own group, which um, I mean, I do have professional groups that I lead, but I want you to have the basic outline for how you could set up a group of other people who can help you um, finish your book. And I think that's really a very, very useful thing, is to have some people that you can read it to. Now, let's start with the problem with some writing groups. And I just like to get this out of the way. There are many, many well-intentioned people who think the best way to help you with your book is to get in there and tell you what's wrong with it. So you read it and then you brace yourself and you're afraid, and they just, launch the artillery at it because they know it's obviously weak or unclear. It is unclear. And the problem with that is many people who don't have particularly airtight skin follicles and muscles feel like this gets lodged in their brain. Oh, I'm really unclear, or it's all over the place, or it's too much, or fill in the criticism. So that is not to say that isn't a time in your process where it will be useful to ask specific questions, and I'll help you with those questions of particular readers about how a particular passage works for them. But to just start off a writing group with like a free-for-all, a pile-on, often some people do thrive in that kind of combative environment, and I don't want to call them bad people. That's just the way they were wired. And but unfortunately, I think we get a lot of books written primarily by thick-skinned people, and the people who are maybe working with anything from like what I have, which is kind of a emotional sensitivity or nervous system. They end up running away and they can't actually keep writing, which doesn't help them finish the book. So what you want to do is set up a writing group for yourself that will help you keep writing. So that's one of the things we're going to cover today. I also have a bit of a survey, which I will email to everybody who came today, which will is kind of a self-evaluation survey of like, why is it that I keep saying I want to finish my book, but I just keep not getting to it, or I can't finish it. And I will it's actually like 23, 24 questions, just a big brainstorm I did on like all of the different things over 15, 20 years that I've been teaching book completion groups that have been problems for different people. And some of them are actually interestingly sort of opposite. Like, I'm afraid of success and I'm afraid of failure. So obviously with that particular one, the advice to give someone would be different. I can't organize my time, or I'm so uptight, everything's so organized, I don't feel any freedom. So this is one of the reasons why I don't have, in general, the book completion groups only have 7 people in them, for example, so that I can meet with people every week and talk to them about what's going on for them, because the strategy for one person will not work for another, which is why I tend to really dislike how to write books. Not all how to write books, but a lot of them, one person, probably a famous person, because publishing companies like that will say, these are the ways that all people will succeed in writing books. And if all you've got to do is follow my instructions, and if you happen to get the right person who's almost exactly the same as you, that might work for you. Like, has anyone heard, make sure that you write every single day. If you have a 9-to-5 job, wake up at 4 in the morning and start writing at 4:30. That doesn't work for me. I completed a number of books. I finished this book, which is a version of this book,
Thank you.
The Abundance of Less, Different Kind of Luxury, Writing Opened the Mind. I have my novel is 650 pages. So I do have some experience in completing books, and I'm a pretty disorganized person, but I have my own method. So it's another thing I want to delve into is a bit of self-reflection, a bit of self-examination in terms of what really works for you, not what you hope works for you, not what you think should work for you, not what someone tells you, but what has actually worked for you. So that'll be another process that we're going to do. And then hopefully we'll have some time to give an example of a coaching session. So we'll have one person to say, hey, this is a question I have about finishing my book, and just hit me with it, and I will do my best to help you out and just model the process that you might do with another person that isn't directive and isn't negativity focused, but is still constructive and will help you. And then hopefully, maybe a few people who have finished their
Have you
books.
got this on record, have you?
Um, Hi, Michael. I'm going to mute you here.
Yeah.
Okay, I do need you to be muted.
Yes.
Okay, welcome. Um, and things like self-talk. How do you talk to yourself? And I'm also hoping, this is just my outline of what we're going to do today, is help you determine, what do you need? Do you need just a writing partner? Do you need an editor, a copy editor, or a content editor? Um, do you need more free writing and tools for free writing? How do you determine what you may need? Okay, so
Yeah.
that's a bit of our overview. I'd like to start. Does everybody have pen and paper handy? Okay, with something you can actually do. And this is about self-reflection. And the original way I was thinking of it is just making a list. And so the list will be, but hold on for a second, don't write it down yet. Because I'm going to modify it a little bit. What has worked for me before? It might be in writing, but you might have gotten a college degree, or succeeded in building something very difficult. Almost everybody has had some measure of success in some part of their life. Uh, but I was talking with my partner Cynthia, who's a big part of me helping to finish as having a good partner, or not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a romantic partner, but someone to help you out, or many people. And she said, well, what if people come up with like, oh, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. So if you want to, you can have two lists going: what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And I want to talk about that for just a second before we start, and then I'll give everybody 4 or 5 minutes just to jot this down. It's not something you'll necessarily read, certainly to the whole group, but you might have a chance to read to two or three other people something if you want to. This is all optional. But on the page, you could say, what has worked for me to finish? It could be a writing project, but if you've not ever finished a book, it doesn't have to be a writing project. So it's just repeating what's already worked. So this is our first concept: is focus on the positive. The positive is going to give you energy. And on the other side, if you want to, like, this doesn't work, so that you can just be aware of it. So again, what works for me to finish a big project, or finish a book, or finish something that, I'm proud that I did at any time in your life. So this could be like in fifth grade, whatever. And to just generate, when I say what has worked. So for example, a rigid schedule, or, many people write down deadlines, but I'm going to encourage you, if the word is deadlines, think about how you can, you don't have to write this down, but think about it. Because say somebody joins a graduate program, right, and puts a bunch of money down and can get a D minus. Well, a deadline might work pretty well. Might actually turn you off, but for some people that would work very well. But if there's no enforcement mechanism, then deadlines are a little harder. So think about that as well. Okay, so let's take, I'll give everybody 4 minutes to just jot down. Again, this is just a list for you. If you want to share some parts of it with some others, you'll have an opportunity to do that. But this is, as I said in the promo for this class, it's going to be interactive. So give you a chance to actually think this out and work with what's already been positive for you. Okay, so it is 6:20, so we'll go for 4 minutes and just jot down as many as you can. And again, if you want to write what doesn't work, that's fine too. And begin. Okay, like 20 or 30 more seconds to finish up the list. You can continue this later yourself. Okay, so let's rejoin the group, and this might be a nice moment to look at all the faces of the people here, and grateful they're all here, and wish them well. Like each one individually, go through their names and faces and say, I hope you have a great success with your book. And if you are doing that, then all the other 19 participants will be giving that back at you. So I believe very strongly that that very much works as even on Zoom. I've seen that. So please wish each person well in whatever their writing project is. Take a moment for that. Um, Now, what we're going to do in a second is we're going to have a chance to share some of those in a small group, but which I'll set up so that you'll be randomly put with three other people. And then you can share what you want to share, or just listen if you don't feel like sharing things that have worked for you. And that's going to be good because A, you're not just relying on yourself, the bootstrap individual who knows everything, or going to the great expert in the sky in the whole hierarchy of that, but more the kindness of people you may not have ever met before, and their own ideas might give you some ideas. Maybe what strategies has worked for them would be good for you. And we'll take just a few minutes for that, so everyone can share a little bit in and participate. But before we do that, I would like you to think about whatever your project is, whatever you are writing now, or would like to write, or feels like it wants to come out of you, just get started, or that you've been stuck about, whatever it is. And instead of any kind of what's wrong or negativity, think about the topic, whether it's the story or the characters, if you're writing fiction, or the place, the location, or the ideas and feelings. Um, and I'd like you to just see if you can touch in with the passion that you have for the thing that you are writing or want to be writing. So um, let's see, I just love to give a little example of this. I'm going to ask permission from two people, Sharon and Dwayne. Can I have permission to share a little bit about the way your book? Okay, good. So Sharon's written a master's thesis on a topic which is interesting to me in music, and how hymns in the Christian tradition have been used in, I'll just use this word, I'm not sure if this is Sharon's word, an oppressive way, and how we might rethink that. And I think that's totally exciting, and I think it's a really important book for the world. So if Sharon, you can at this moment touch into your reason for showing up to this class, showing up for the other group that you're in, continuing to try, just touch in, and this is just like an internal moment of like, I really do care about this, and I really do want this done. Dwayne's is a lawyer. He has this non-confrontational approach to lawsuits and helping people touch into their own intuition and their own peacefulness, and so that their own values can be involved in even scary lawsuits. So I, again, love this book, and I really hope I can help Dwayne get this book onto everyone's shelves, because I think it's a screaming hole in even those of us who are like peace, love. But then again, there's the lawsuit, and I'm going to fight. So whatever your moment is, take 45 seconds. If you want to write something down, you can, or just internally think about what you love about uh, this project, whether it's current, future, stalled. Ignore all that. Why do you care about it? So I'm going to encourage you to stoke your passion again and again for this. Why do you love it? And this is going to be much more important than 16 varieties of sentence structure or 12 organizational charts or even like how to revise with more pleasure, which I will teach you a little bit of today. Really just touch in again and again with that. And that, if it's strong enough, whatever the obstacles are, and if you repeat it to yourself, this is a neuropsychological process. Repeating that, you're going to be in training your brain and in training your body and creating new neuronal pathways between your pleasure and joy and passion centers of the brain and the language center of your brain, or the practical, how do I get this done center of your brain. So I just really encourage you to return to that again and again. Okay. For those of you who've never been in a group with me, we have certain ethics when we share in groups. So please, if you can, listen to this. I'll give you the shortest possible version of it. Try to make sure that everything that comes out of your mouth to somebody else, particularly when you give them feedback on what they're saying, is encouraging them to keep writing. Nothing that's like, well, that seems kind of boring to me, or that won't work for me, or you really have a worse problem than I do, or you're on a control trip. I heard that once in one of my first writing class. Don't say anything like that. Encouraging, positive, supportive to every other person. They are as fragile and vulnerable and susceptible as you are. So that is my request. The way we're going to do this is I'd like you to choose 3 things that have worked for you. So go to your list of things, and you don't have to do 3. And again, you can completely pass. So if it's your turn, you're like, I think I'm just going to pass. No problem. But if you'd like to share 3 things, and then we'll just do this alphabetically by first name. So whoever's name is closer to the letter A will go first. Share 3 things and make each one not more than 2 or 3 sentences. Don't explain a whole huge process, because we want to be able to come back to the room, and whoever is the last person to share doesn't want to have no more time left. So please be sensitive to that. So 2 or 3 sentences per, or it could be just like, a timer. That should be a single word. Timer helps me. And if someone shares something that you think would be helpful, you can write that down. And if you have a few minutes after all 3 people have shared, you can chat about it a little bit. But this is just a way not only for you to give to strangers, not that I think there are really any strangers, but people maybe you don't know, your techniques, learn from them some techniques, but maybe even more importantly, by physically speaking it out loud. These are 3 things that have worked in the past, and it may not be for writing a book. Again, it could be for training a dog. It's really worked for me. That'll actually help you remember it and ingrain it into your brain. Okay, so let's do that. Let's see, how many minutes do you think that will take? Let's do 8 minutes. So that'll give you some time. Oh, thank you, Chris, for bringing the puppy here. Chris's dog is helping us out. See, there's allies coming in from the outside at all times. Your dog my dog helps me get my nervous system in check. So be aware of all the things that are already helping you. That's another good one for you. Okay, so I might join 1 or 2 groups, but again, alphabetically. Be kind. Don't say anything that's going to discourage someone. Share 3 things with other people. And while you do it, kind of feel it a little bit. Don't just kind of read it off the list, but be like, drinking. Here's mine. I'll give you one example. Drinking hot Earl Grey tea with milk and honey. I have written many books with this as a supporting factor. It keeps my nervous system within a window of tolerance so that I can keep writing. All right, so let's go into the breakout rooms. I think, let's see, we have 20 people, and I'm one of them. Let's see, if we do 5, that will be 3 to 4, and if we do 6, that'll be 3 to 4. Yeah, let's just do that. Okay, so you may have 4 people in your group. So Yeah, 8 minutes, and if people need more time, we'll figure that out as well. Okay. Oh, Vernalisa here twice. Okay, I'll try to work that out. Thank you. All right, let's do it. And I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone here.
Oh,
Mute yourself. If not, yeah, go
sorry
ahead.
for the typo.
Okay, so if you're just returning, what we're doing is if you feel comfortable with using the chat window, just go ahead and write down one thing that someone else in your group said that was useful to you in terms of maybe I'll try that out. And then everyone who is here can look at that chat window later. I'm going to save this chat and send it to everybody who is a participant. So I should have your email addresses. So there'll be a follow-up email with many of the resources I'm going to share with you, including some YouTube talks that I've given on this topic. So this is all about, in my view, sharing and sharing and sharing, because you know what? World's hard enough as it is. This whole individualism thing is mostly bunk, and we need each other. So if you have a moment to put that in the chat window, then we'll move on to the next thing I'll try to help you with. And I am going through and muting everybody right now. So if you do have a question or you want to interrupt me, that is completely fine. Like if I confuse you, that's my fault, not yours. So feel free to just be like, wait a minute, what did you mean by that, Andy? Um, and actually, before I move on to the next thing I have planned, it occurs to me that if something came up, maybe just one or two people, someone shared something and said, well, I can never do that, or like, or a question that came up from your sessions with each other. Let's create a space for people to ask that in public. So just go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question or something. How do I want to say this? That maybe someone said, "Oh, I love having this Earl Grey tea," and you'd be like, "What the heck does that have to do with anything, Andy?" Or, I also can't wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write. What do I do? Anything like that. Let's just give a moment for some full group interaction and hit me with a difficult question if you have. Okay. There'll be opportunity to do that later. I'm going to go ahead and make my um, screen bigger so that you can see the cover of a book that I'm going to recommend to you that has been tremendously helpful. It's called Art and Fear: Observations on the Perils and Rewards of Art Making. It's quite a small book, When I first read it, I got so excited by it. I read it 3 times. I read it several other times since then. It's all like little 1 page, 2 page snippets, so it's easy to read. I actually then met one of the authors who lived in Santa Cruz, lives in Santa Cruz. He was pretty much the main disciple of Ansel Adams, the photographer. And I would like to read you a short quote from this book, but I do recommend if you, this is just a good process book to think about why is it that it's difficult to finish any kind of art project, and I find it very reassuring. But I'm going to read you just one little passage and then talk about this a little bit because I think it's a good passageway to it. And this is just in case this kind of thing matters to you. Apparently, this book sells 5,000 copies every single month. It's been translated into a lot of different languages, so it has a broad appeal. Okay, here we go. The hardest part of art making. This is page 61. The hardest part of art making is living your life. Each phrase in this, I think, is a gem. Is living your life in such a way that your work gets done over and over. And that means, among other things, finding a host of practices that are just plain useful. Here's the part that's really juicy for me. A piece of art is the surface expression, a piece of art is the surface expression of a life lived within productive patterns. Over time, the life of a productive artist becomes filled with useful conventions and practical methods, so that a string of finished pieces continues to appear at the surface. This was revolutionary to me because I have been raised in the, maybe it's romantic, as in like German romanticism or like whatever 19th century romantic view, like just the it's all about love, and passion is really important. That's why I brought that up first. But it's like getting down to the very practical things that make it possible for you to just be in a productive cycle, whatever they are for you. And it is very individualized. What is going to work for someone is not going to work for someone else. So, and then to writing, let's call it writing, the artwork appears at the surface, one after another, is living your life in a productive pattern, whatever those patterns, a host of practices. So that means a lot of practices. So with that in mind, I'm just going to look over the chat window because that was a little, I wasn't able to read at the same time as I was speaking. Have a map of the project. Where am I? Where am I going? Setting a timer, designing small books, the physical connection of designing a book. Trusting that whatever I'm drawn to will lead me to the perfect thing. Okay, Chris, that's great because it fits into something. All of them are great, but Chris, that's great, particularly because this leads into something I want to say. Longhand, writing things longhand. Reading aloud. And so reading aloud just to yourself or to your dog. I have a veterinarian in one of my classes finished her book when she goes on camping trips and she reads a book aloud to her dogs. And apparently that helped her catch a lot of things that she wanted to change. Accountability with a partner or group. And I think accountability is a little bit of a tricky thing for people to work with. Small steps. Well, thank you. So I would say you now have a list of both your practices as well as some from your group. Try to see if today is Wednesday, tonight or tomorrow, you can put into practice one you've already done and maybe another one that you would like to institute, and see if it works. Be a good scientist, be a good experimenter. If it doesn't work, don't beat yourself with it. If it gives you energy, are you happier? Are you less scared? Are you more inspired? Repeat that. So I've been teaching writing since was it 97, so that'd be 26 years. And when I first started, I had like a group with 3 people in it, and I was really scared. How can I do this? And I haven't actually had a day job besides doing this for like 20 years now. But when I just started, I was like, this is never going to work. How's this going to work? And I went to my mentor, and he said this thing to me, which I think will be useful to you. He's like, well, you have a class now. I was like, yeah, but there's only 3 people in it. And he's like, well, how did those 3 people find you? It's like, well, I put up some posters on telephone poles in San Francisco. And he's like, Put up more posters. Put up more posters, Andy. That's what happened. And for years, I would just make sure that I was putting up posters. And so, whatever has already worked, do more of that. It's so simple, but it is really the thing. So, if it is, I'll just give you a few. If it is loving the texture of word sounds and the pattern, if it's reading poetry, if it is, I call it fetishizing the word sounds themselves or the words, just loving them. Maybe that's something that gives you a lot of energy. If you're an orderly person, maybe that whole thing about waking up at 5 mornings a week before you go to your office job, maybe that's the thing that's going to work for you. Having a group, making sure that that group is set up to be nurturing and supportive for you. And I'm going to give you some guidelines on that later. Okay, so here's one of the biggest things that I think people get in trouble with. Actually, I'm going to start one more before that, which is, where do I start? Where do I start? Where do I start? This is a piece of good news. No one believes this. Well, I think people have a hard time believing it because it just seems like that's so offhand, Andy. But I believe I can make a case for it. Where do I start? Wherever you're wherever you're feeling passion right now. So, for example, say Karen is feeling passionate about a new kraut recipe. Hint, hint. Karen will share some more fun kraut things for you. But say she's feeling passionate about it, but she thinks, you know what, that's like going to be way at the back of the book. That's recipes, right? And I need to be talking about, why is fermentation important, or like what is the microbiome in your gut, or that has to go first. I've got an outline. But if this moment, this particular recipe, and I've gotten some great kraut recipes from Karen Wong-Diggs, by the way, if she's passionate about it, and she's not really feeling the microbiome chapter, if she forces herself, excuse me, Karen, for using this as an example, I don't have any detail about her passion about which one, but I'm just making this up. If she forces herself into writing about the microbiome and the bacterial thing when she's not really feeling it, it's probably not going to have as much energy or excitement or good word choice or interesting sentences or even the intellectual backbone of the microbiome chapter, because part of her is like, I'm just really excited about using coriander and cumin and turmeric with bok choy in this kraut recipe. That's what her passion is at that moment. So where do you start is, what do you feel at this moment? And if you force yourself into doing the part that you hate, as we're talking about just generating material right now, I should be clear, then it's going to come through in the interstices, in the spaces between the words. People are going to feel like, wow, that person really was like hating this when they wrote it, or was indifferent, or so really you can reorganize your book at any time. Even if it's a narrative piece of fiction, if you are writing a memoir, you are right. And there's and you don't have to be happy about it, by the way. Let's say there was a very painful moment and it's just been coming up again and again and again in your writing, in your mind, excuse me, and you just like, and I just have the passion to just get it out now. That writing might need some revising later. It might need some edges rounded off. I don't know. But it's going to be a lot easier to do that later when you're not in that state, if it's already got energy, than for you to plod through something you don't care about and then just add a bunch of cayenne pepper into it and hope it tastes good. It's just much less likely. So the question of where do I start is really wherever you're feeling passion. Now, maybe you have an outline. I have some things to say about organizing texts, but and I have a whole video on it. I will share that with you on how to organize big, long texts, which about 25 minutes long. I'll share that in an email with people, and many people have found that helpful. But let's say you just have like a list of topics. That'll do. That'll do. Just or whatever's coming up for you. Maybe you don't even have a list. Where to start is. So I would like to ask if there's any pushback on that. Does anyone feel like, you know what, I'm not sold starting wherever, or is it going to create a mess later? Does anyone have any objections or questions about that statement. I do like pushback, by the way, especially.
I have a thought or a question.
Uh-huh.
Um, I feel like I'll do the inspired parts, which there are parts that inspired me. Then there's this growing pile of aversion over here, and that's my fear that someday I'll run into that, and it will be this insurmountable 300-foot wall.
Hmm. Okay, so this is where the individual coaching kind of comes in. Thank you, Dwayne, and I'll get your question also, Sharon, later. So sometimes you do have to do the thing that is a little bit like teeth pulling. But Dwayne, let me just do a little. Um, Actually, let's just do a little example coaching here. Dwayne, go ahead and unmute yourself. So, Dwayne, when someone goes to a court of law and they have something that they have an aversion to, right? Maybe it's the paperwork, maybe it's like talking to the judge. They just don't want to do it. They'll do anything else but that. What advice do you give them?
First, I tell them how important that piece is and kind of the why they need to do that and why it'll help them win their case. So that gives some motivation. And then I'll try to simplify it or break it down into steps. I'll give them a sample. I'll suggest an outline. I'll talk them through a little bit of it. I'll take notes. I'll help them create it.
Nice. Fabulous. And Dwayne has an online course he's been developing, and we'll have him put that in the chat window if that's available to the public. I don't know if it is yet, but so let's take that into writing. Dwayne has this pile, growing bigger maybe, of pieces that are a version. So it might work for you. It might not, but you can try, of giving yourself reasons why this is important to have this in the book, and then giving yourself examples and structures there. But maybe even before that is doing some writing about aversion, about the sense of aversion, about the identify with the id. The 3-year-old that's like, I don't want to, right? We all have that, right? So like, let's let it speak, let it rant. And sometimes, like with 3-year-olds, when they get it out, they're like, okay, I can do it. A second thing I would say is see if you can find some pleasure in some part of it. Maybe it's the word choice, or maybe it's the logic of this part that you're having some aversion to. A third piece of advice is maybe it's just going to be hard writing. You know, you've written all the fun parts, and this particular piece is just a grind. And I've had that. This is just how I do it, with as many pleasurable sensory things happening to me as I can, so that my aversion, distaste, all of that doesn't kind of pop me out of the window of tolerability. So again, for me, it might be the Earl Grey tea. I have a playlist of kind of instrumental music that kind of is chill groove music, which, you know, I wrote a book about people who are living in the mountains of rural Japan in, you know, old thatch roof cottages, and I was listening to electronic dance music while I was doing it. But it allowed me to calm my nervous system down and put your feet in a foot bath. Sometimes just that physical thing, an aroma that makes you feel at ease, your puppy next to you, anything that makes you just feel some form of yumminess. So that would be the beginning of how I would work with Dwayne if he were in a group with me. And he'd try that week and then come back next week. And you know what? This didn't work. And then we would go into an inquiry process. So I feel like that, not just giving like, okay, this is how you're going to fix it, but this iterative cycle process is very helpful, whether that's with me or with someone else or with a friend or partner. Sharon, you had a question.
I had to find my mouse. I'm finding that when I start writing and really juicy parts that I have an emotional feeling about, I find that in my book, as I write about these, I'm always hearkening back to 3 assumptions that I think are at the root of all the other stuff I'm saying. And I haven't explained those well. And so I want to refer back, like like you think this because you're assuming that. And that is a wrong assumption because of X, Y, and Z. But I haven't written the X, Y, and Z chapter. So like I want to refer back. So as in chapter 2, and I find that maybe I need to bite that bullet and write those 3 chapters about those fundamental things so I can go along and then refer back to them.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what my idea is on that.
I don't know.
No, here's an idea on it. Maybe that'll work. Here's another one. Write that sentence, as I say in chapter 2, even though you haven't written chapter 2. So go ahead, and when you're in your passionate space, it's like, blah, blah, blah. Here's the 3. I mean, if you have the 3 core assumptions, you've probably written them down in your master's thesis, but like just keep going as you're in their passionate space, as I write about in chapter 2, and then when you have, say, 50 pages of writing, then you do a global search for the words chapter 2.
Chapter 2, yeah.
Then you pluck them out and put them in the new, every time you mention, as I say in chapter 2, and then you'll already have a bit of a framework, and then you kind of put them in the sentences that you pulled out, like, oh, it would be an interesting way to have this flow. And then at that point, you'd be like, what's, then you can ask yourself, what's still not said?
Yeah,
yeah. And then I might say a second thing, a different thing. And again, you try it and see if this works. It may not work. My guess is in your work life, you have people who have been suffering because they don't understand A, B, and C, these 3 principles, right? So try to think of about a particular person that you either know of or you've worked with or you've given advice to, and have their picture in your mind or in front of you if you have it, and think about talking to them, particularly when they're in their state of, I know a little bit about Sharon's book, suffering, right? Their brain and what they've been told and what they understand about spirituality, for example, and what they've been told and what they've actually have experienced are in conflict, and they're creating stress. Am I right so far there, Sharon? Right?
You're correct. Yeah. So they don't even know.
Right. Think about a particular person, because we all have caring natures. We all have care for other people, right? And so like thinking, this is a nonfiction thing, so someone who's working with fiction might be a different thing, but think about that person who does not yet know it, and they are hemorrhaging, metaphorically, from not knowing that, and you care, you have compassion for that. That will, I think, get you to, and they're a very logical person, might help, right? They need it proven to them because whoever gave them the advice that's causing them the pain gave it to them very logically. And it's like, if you are, don't follow the male god in the sky with the white beard, you will go into hell. And these are the reasons. And these are all the people who've gone to hell before. And your name is on the list, whatever it is. Okay. So that's a little bit of interaction there. Oh, we have one more question. All right. So let's do that. But then I want to move on to some more content. Michael, can you ask the question in a brief fashion? Go ahead, Michael. Unmute. Can't hear you.
Mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm having all sorts of trouble with this. The first time on this concept. Question is, how do you? I've written about 300 versions of a book over the last 10 or 15 years. And they've all ended up in the bin. And it's because it's one book only, but I've written about, as I said, 300 versions. It's slight exaggeration. And what happens is I kind of read back on this book and I go, oh my God, this is terrible. I don't like it. I don't like what I'm saying.
Yes.
And it sort of reminds me of, I don't like my singing voice. When I play the guitar, everyone's saying, you sing. I go, no, I don't like my voice. And it's the same thing, I don't know what it is. You just kind of, every time I read, even different versions, they always have the same result. They end up in the bin.
Anyone else have
How do you get around that?
Anyone else feel this at one time or another? Raise your hand if that's like something you go through. All right. Thank you, Michael. So this is a huge one for many, many people.
Good.
And first of all, if they're not actually literally in the bin, if they're still on your hard drive, hold on to them. Okay.
Yeah.
And if we work together, I don't want to give you too little right now, but if you can hang around afterwards, I want to give you a longer version of it. So first of all, I want everyone to think about when I say I'm a painter. Do you think I am a house painter with a roller and a broad brush, or I am a fine artist with a little camel hair brush? I would like you to think about the difference between those two jobs, both of them honorable jobs, right? But often in our minds, when we read something that we've written, there might be a particular word or phrase, or in my case, my singing voice, there might be like an off note. And I'm like, I don't know if this is true for you. I suck, right? Just kind of a broad, like, this is horrible. Oh, this is going to ruin everybody's day for a month for listening to one off note. So going to the fine art painter, instead of painting with a broad brush, this is horrible, right? Or this is illogical, which is better, right? Because it's more defined than horrible. Or drilling down to the finer and finer diagnosis or definition. This takes a little bit of intellectual work. Do it on a good day when you're feeling, reasonably positive and not full of, bile, or you didn't sleep well, which is often my problem. But, with a generous heart and an optimistic mind, you're like, what's really happening here? And I would say a lot of the times for people, it's one sentence, or it's one particular turn of phrase, or it's some kind of repetition that could be cut out, right? So this is repetitive, right? Is a little better, right, than illogical, right? Because then it's like more and more something you can handle, right? Or I use this word more often. All right, too much is negative. Change it to I use this word more than I think the readers will tolerate. Or and then you can just go in there with tweezers and pull that word out and switch it for another word. If it's something else that you're thinking isn't working, instead of, so this is a big philosophical thing. You can write down this phrase and look it up, because it's actually a whole school of theory and practice called appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry, and it's in the field of organizational development. So if you're in a nonprofit, you might hire, they might hire someone like, our accounting department has gone haywire and everybody hates each other and it's not working, right? But you'd actually go into the organization and find out which parts of the organization are working. So appreciation, right? And then you inquire into it. So if you have a definition of illogical, right, or doesn't follow, or a meat eater will not be persuaded to become a vegan because I haven't, marshaled enough facts, right? Then you have a definition. Like, maybe I can get some more facts, or maybe you're like, meat eaters are not going to become vegans because of my book, and that's not what I want to do with my book. But the appreciative inquiry, and this is for everybody, is once you've got the definition, find some part of your book anywhere in the entire book or any other writing you've ever done that doesn't do that. In fact, is an example of the opposite of that. And then slow down into it.
Yeah.
Read it again. Read it again and again. Wow, Andy, that 3-note sequence on that recording of you was not out of key. I've not done this. But this is the metaphor, right? Try to find some place that's already working, and then soak your mind, marinate yourself in that one paragraph. I call that the golden paragraph. The golden paragraph that is written well, that does say what you want to say. And when you feel the rhythm of it, and you feel the flow of it, and you actually will conjure up the mind state. This is the consciousness approach to writing that is your own writing, write in that way. Then you return sweetly and kindly to the part that you don't like, which is not like 10 pages, it's actually like half a page, right? And you're like, oh, clearly this is not happening. I'm going to rewrite these 3 concepts with that music in my head. Here we go. This is a picture of the young Allen Ginsberg, friend of mine sent to me. He wrote his most famous poem, Howl, while listening to Ray Charles. he listened and listened to Ray Charles. I think he was on amphetamines all night in some garret in North Beach. But anyway, he had that music going through his mind, and it produced one of the most celebrated, I still love that poems of the 20th century by having that music going. Now, in this case, he kind of marinated himself in Ray Charles. What I'm suggesting is that you marinate yourself in that golden paragraph of your own that isn't full of like, I hate this. So that's a short answer. There's a lot more strategies.
Yeah.
I hope that'll.
Yeah, I'm getting your drift.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It's cool. It's great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question. I want to move on to another thing. So this is the bottleneck kick the can section of why am I so stuck about writing my book. Bottleneck kick the can. What do I mean by that? Writing a book, especially a long project, has a lot of decisions in it. Hundreds, if not thousands, but let's call it hundreds just to not be too scary, because it's, say it's a 70,000 word book. That's 70,000 word choices that you have to do. Right? Not to scare you, but it can be done, right? But there's a lot of different things. I'm going to mute you here, Michael. Okay. So what happens is people get into a bottleneck. They try to do all of these decisions at the same time. And a lot of these decisions take pretty much most of your consciousness and most of your brain, and maybe not even just one day's worth of brain, may take a week's worth of brain. So if you're in the middle of deciding whether to, let's choose an example from, who can I, Karen, I know I always talk about this book of yours that you were writing, but can I use the example of The Gentleman's Guide? Do you mind me using that just because it's in my mind, or you prefer me not to? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay, I think that was a yes. Okay, Karen was in a class of mine some years back, and she has this book called The Gentleman's Guide to Food and Fornication. And it's really fun, and it's basically helping the target audience at that time, might have changed, was men in their 20s and 30s who are maybe not as sensitive as they could be. And the trick is, like, if you make, I guess these are, I don't know if that has to be het men or not, but I think, like, if you say, you know what, if you cook a good meal, you might get laid, right? And I think it's just a brilliant idea. And Karen's a nutritionist and a cook, and the idea is get them into learning how to cook, and they'll, whatever they're interested in might happen to them. But what I loved about Karen's book is that it's a stealth thing to help actually make women's lives better, because then when men get more sensitive, then actually they become better partners. So I think there's brilliance in that as well. So one thing Karen brought up with me some years back is, like, when the Me Too thing happened, was big in the news, and it's still happening, let me just say. It's like, how do you play with this decision of how exactly do you represent or play to heterosexual male sexuality? Is that fair enough, Karen? That was like a question to, I don't want to misrepresent it, and it's been a couple of years. So do you want to put it in your own words?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, it's been more than a couple of years. And so just so everybody knows, that book did not get published because
yet,
there's a problem with it yet, I know, but and I'm still sitting with that, although admittedly, and thank you, Andy, for your help, when I reread some of the passages from that book, compared to the other ones, the one that is published, that the writing in this one was much more artistic, and it's a lot finer. However, I would have to say, though, that did not get published. So there is that duality between wanting to be truly artistic and representing everything that I really wanted to in that book, versus then you have something that is easier and then it gets published. So, there's that duality.
Yeah, great. So thanks for bringing that up. So let's take this as an example of the bottleneck. And what do I mean by kick the can, right? So a decision like, how do I edit the passages such that it aligns with the culture's understanding of dating or quote getting laid and all of that, right? So that's something that takes a lot of thinking, and it takes a lot of thinking as you read from the beginning to the end of your book, right? And to try to be at that same moment going like, how many words does this need to have, and what's the title going to be, and what should I name each of the chapters? Each of these thoughts, naming chapters, Cynthia and I took like 2 weeks to name the chapters, and like the title of the book sometimes takes longer than that, and it's only 6 words. It takes all you have to make that decision. So one of the reasons people get stuck is because they're trying to do too much at once. So one of the questions is, how artistic should it be? And, or how do I fit this into what I understand of what will get published? And when I say what I think, what I understand, someone who works in publishing all the time still can't predict whether something's going to get published. Certainly the rest of us can't predict, and it's all about passion. But trying to figure that out, and like what are my core concepts that I'd rather not have it get published than to misrepresent that. These are big questions, and even just revising decisions, they take everything. So one of the reasons people get into this bottleneck is they try to cram all these things at the same time. So this gets to the kick the can. Do it later. Do almost everything you can later. So if it's coming into your mind, it keeps bothering you, how, what's the title going to be? What's the title going to be? I had a great title, but someone took it, what am I going to do with my title? And you can't write another sentence, you write it down on a piece of paper, put it on a note on your wall, on an index card, put it as a comment in Microsoft Word, whatever it is that you need to acknowledge that thought is there, but don't try to solve all the problems at the same time. And, the navigation, I believe, Karen, the book that did get published was one that someone came to you and said, could you write this book? And so that's always easier, right? If someone's already like ready to have it. And sometimes it just takes a lot of time. Just writing query letters and sending them out and researching, it takes a lot of time and energy. So you just, as much as you can do later, this is my principle, do it later. And what do you do first? What you care about and your passion. All right. All right. So I think, given what time it is, I'm going to share with you this little survey. It's kind of long, so I'm going to read it out loud. And because it's got a lot of kind of big things that people have problems with, maybe one or two of them might be like, oh my God, that's me. And I'm not going to read it slowly enough that everybody can take notes on every single one of them, because it's just going to take too long to do. But this is like a self-survey. I'm going to send it to everybody who's here as a PDF. But as you listen, see if you notice which is your issue. So this is basically like, I say I want to finish my book, but I just keep not finishing it. And number 24 of the reasons is, I'll read it here, is I have, let's see, let me just find the exact wording here. I'm going to read this one first. I have a sick parent, partner, or small child, and that just actually takes up every moment of time that I have. So if that is your situation, or your own health takes up every real moment and more that you should be even sleeping, don't beat yourself up for not writing your book. Give yourself a break until that situation resolves in some way. Don't be like, what's wrong with me? Okay. All the rest of these hopefully are things that I think you can address. So let's see if I can share the screen here. And this is just a taste of it, but it's a survey. And I think even people in my book completion group may not have seen this. Okay. I'm convinced This is a work in progress, by the way. I'm convinced that the writing is bad, doesn't make sense. Fill in the criticism. So why put so much time into it? I'm actually confused on how to solve problems in the writing, what to work on first, how to revise, how to organize it, how to generate new material. So I don't know how to move forward. And then with this, you can do the survey. One, this is me. And there's some hints in here. Who am I to be so arrogant or self-important to say to people, I wrote a book, here's my book. This is, I have found, often the product of gender-specific early socialization. Who wants to listen to what girls have to say? So fighting the patriarchy is part of what we're about here at the opening. Here's one that's big for me. Some of them aren't, right? So number 3, for whatever reason, I feel fine saying, I wrote a book, I have cool ideas, but you might not feel that. I don't have enough control over my psychological libido. Ooh, that other thing is so interesting in that one too. That other book or the YouTube clip or the TV show or the movie or the Facebook or the travel or the going camping. And you just don't have enough control over that libido. What if it doesn't succeed as a book? So what is your template? This book, sold only 50 copies. Oh, nobody read it, I've heard professional famous authors on stages saying, nobody read that book of mine. And I look it up and it's like 70 or 80,000 copies, but they're used to 200,000 copies. What if it did succeed? This is the opposite one. Well, really well. I don't know if I can handle that. I'm so shy. Better to avoid writing. This happens subliminally, by the way. So these are kind of things you might want to think about in a more quiet moment. I'm not that good at resisting the requests or expectations of others. And sometimes these are internalized. And the others in my life don't actually have that expectations or as strongly as I imagine them. But you do need time to write your book. You need to make time. Here's number 8. I'm not perfectly sure what the book will turn out to be or what shape it will be exactly. And I can't tolerate that level of ambiguity. This is a huge one for many people. And that's why one of the reasons I recommend Art and Fear so much is because they really take that on and show you that you need to have that ambiguity. You need to not know. Not only is it something you have to tolerate, but if you know too much about exactly what it's going to be a two-dimensional book. Okay, here's the truth. I like eating out or exercising or walking in nature, going on vacation. They're just more important to me than finishing my book. Here's one that I am noticing myself. And this is a mindfulness approach, by the way. I can go with a problem-solving approach and try to fix it, but I think sometimes just being aware of some of these things, like I unconsciously make decisions, make commitments about what I will do next week or in 2 months' time that limit the time I have available every day. And that results in my saying, oh, I have too many commitments. And it does seem like it's out of your control. Here's a completely different one. It's just enjoyable working on my book. And if I were done, then I would lose that. Some people are just enjoying it. And that's okay, by the way. There's nothing, virtually, I know this seminar is about how to finish my book or how to get started. So that's what our focus is. But if you just love working on your book and you're just not that interested in the other parts of it, the other parts of it are work sometimes, writing press releases, going on interviews, having a fight with the publisher, which happens. I hope it happens. You want to stand up for yourself. I only like to write when my mood is inspired. So if I'm down or I'm confused, I'm not feeling flow, I just stop doing the writing. That can happen consciously or unconsciously. So I want to tell you that you do not need to be in a flow state to write or to write well. I can help you with that. But again, this is a huge topic and we only have a couple hours. So here's another one that Art and Fear helps with. I have such inflated imaginings of the celestial choir of my finished book that the actual flawed text never lives up to it, and I don't write or I stop writing, And there's a great story in Art and Fear in which there's a young composer and a master older composer, and he's like, the music that I hear in my mind, says the young composer, is so much more beautiful than what I end up writing down. And the old guy says, what do you think? What makes you think that ever stops? Of course, it's not going to be exactly the same as you imagine it. Oh, I can't tolerate my house being messy, so I must clean up first. Right. Well, there's more here. I think that's in order to not overwhelm you all, that's a good start. And again, I will send that to you. let me ask people, did one of those or two of those like hit hit the target, or maybe even hit a sore spot for you? And if so, would you feel like speaking up, either to ask a question or maybe even propose out loud, I think I could probably work with this, not necessarily solve it, but work with this in the following way. Hi, Sharon. Hold on for a second. I'm going to let Hank speak because he hasn't spoken in the group yet. Go ahead, Hank.
Yeah, I noticed that as you were sharing and I was going over it, I realized that there's some message that I carry that being artistic is seen as like lazy, which has all sorts of judgments and connotations, but also that there seems to be like some classism. Like I come from working class people and who've worked to get educations and better themselves, but for some reason, like it feels like it's not good enough if I'm just a writer. Like I should be doing more with myself than that. So I just came across like this whole wealth of judgment that feels like my own and also my ancestors.
Right. So if you were coaching yourself on how to work with that, Hank, what might you say to yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. Super vulnerable. If I was coaching myself, I think what I probably would do is take that as a writing prompt, and I would use this opportunity to reach out and like write that question down. Where does this belief come from? Who's sharing it with me? Is this a part of me? Is this my ancestor? And I would start to engage with that part. And then depending on what comes up, I think also just if maybe it leads to a pile of bullshit or trauma I don't want to get into, it might not be helpful. And so I think it gives me the opportunity to see what's there. And then it gives me another opportunity to reframe and rewrite and then rewrite the story with my own voice. So I would take it as like, how do I get support? And then how do I make that into my art and expression?
Beautiful.
That's what I would do.
How can I make the support into my art? I love you, Hank. We've worked together before. You always have these great ideas. Susan, I'm going to get to you. And Sharon, do you mind if I have Susan's and then Sharon? But I want to say one more thing about what Hank said. I think class in America is never talked about, and it really needs to be talked about. And it is a huge, huge thing that I want to say to everybody who's here and everybody who I meet. Try to start thinking about it. We've been encouraged a lot in media to think more about, say, gender or ethnicity and race, and that's good. But like class in America is a huge factor and has a lot. And in my partner and I come from different social classes. My parents came from different social classes. So this is a real thing, and it does have effects on your psychology because social psychology is a real thing. But I want to also say allies is a great thing. So Hank, I happened to reconnect with a writer who I think Susan might have been in your same era. Was Costa Bagakis ever in a class with you, Susan? Or Gus Bagakis? Anyway, he has written a book about class in America, and it's called Seeing Through the System. And I know he's got a writing group. So, Hank, if this is, but that's just some one person I know. And it's like finding other people who identify as working class and say, like, it doesn't have to be a group of them. It doesn't have to be like an ongoing group. It could be just like a couple of discussions set up on some of these principles of respect, no crosstalk, sharing with each other, listening deeply, and some insights can come out. So sometimes working with people who are whatever, I don't want to use the word category, but feel like of a group with you on these issues. And the last thing I'll say, Hank, is this is actually in a lot of writing about a lot of interviews with with so many artists, particularly through the 20th century, which is very well documented. Paul Robeson, and many other, I think James Baldwin. Who are you to write? So I'm not coming up with a big long list, but I think if you go through, the memoirs of people who've gotten quite famous, that's a great way to do it. Okay. Susan, I know people putting things in the chat. I am focusing on talking right now, so I haven't read your chats. I will in a second. Susan, you have a question, then we'll get to Sharon's, and then I'll get back to some of the things I have planned for today. Susan, go ahead.
Well, you asked what the things that resonated with us most were, and for me, it was a combination of taking on commitments. In the survey, it said for a few months from now that limit my time. Too often, I think I take on commitments that are sort of ongoing. And then there's the multitude of self-care and commitments to family, and then I want to put a third category in there, which is addictions. Like I'm on the 4th volume of a fantasy epic that has 14 total volumes, and I love living in this alternate universe. I'm a recovering marijuana addict, and I can see, I'm escaping, but it's not chemical. It's but it takes an enormous amount of time.
Yep. Well, I will say, first of all, the main thing is to just certainly be aware of it in yourself. And then if you're sharing it out loud to a group, that is, even more powerful. So just kind of sitting with that. And by the way, I'm also can I say recovered? It's been a long time, but marijuana addiction. And I have an addictive personality. Like I don't have a smartphone, and it gets harder and harder every year to not have a quote smartphone. But I picked one up when I was traveling, and sure enough, I was just like on it all the time, and I wasn't working on my writing. So sometimes it's just making choices and being like, okay, we are taking or buying all 14 of these. I don't know if this is going to work for you, but we're going to buy all 14 of them. I have them. I'm going to put them in a box, and I'm going to ship them to Alaska, to a post office there, general delivery. And I have to go to Alaska to get these books. Something like that. Be playful is, I guess, the message on it. And the mantra, sometimes axioms, I'll call them the axioms, are very good ways of organizing complex information into a simple thing. So one of the axioms I have for myself is, it is much easier to be not busy a month from now than it is to be not busy tomorrow. And it is even more easier to be not busy 6 months from now. So just be aware when you take on, whether it's ongoing commitments or not. Here's an exercise. Talk about it a little bit. This is a little spicy. May not work for you. Go up to the mirror. I'm going to say for myself, I, Andy Couturier, am choosing to help my Guatemalan friends find an apartment in San Francisco this summer. I love them, and I want them to, they're coming here and they don't have a place to stay, and I live here. And I, Andy Couturier, am choosing to help Tanya and Bari find an apartment instead of writing my book right now. And looking at myself in the mirror and saying that, I, Andy Couturier, am choosing not to work on my book now in order to read my fantasy novel. And sometimes just the thought of going up to doing it will get you in there. All right. There's more to say on this. And again, this is why I love having the book completion group. It is just a very interactive thing, and there's so many aspects of it, as you can probably feel from this, and I do want to be sure to not overwhelm. So let's get Sharon's question. There you are, Sharon. And then I will move on with a few wrap up kind of things. And I know, Elizabeth, you have a question. I think since you are in a group, go ahead and email me that, and we'll work on it on Friday. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, I'd like to build on what you just said, Andy. Andy, am choosing to help my friends find an apartment instead of writing my book. That is basically the gist of all of the numbers that I wrote down from your little survey. It's about it doesn't seem like I'm choosing, but it's like the obligations are so strong on help this person here, help that effort there, that it looks like I am not in control. And I wonder if there is some gender issue, gender stuff going on there, because women, especially women of a certain age like me, were taught that you are to be of service. And most of the time you're of service to a man, a lot of times the husband, but doesn't have to be that. But it's a really, really huge thing to try to get over, or to try to establish those boundaries that says, no, I love my friends, but I'm not going to help them. I'm choosing not to help them find an apartment because I'm choosing my book. That
Yeah.
seems to me, like that, just all this, oh, how could you be that selfish? How could you be that unhelpful? How could you be such a bad person?
No.
Getting over that is really hard.
Maybe it's not even, yeah, I agree, totally agree. And maybe it's not even getting over it. It's just enduring that feeling that you have, right? It's like, because there's a lot of things to endure. You have to endure not having a book. For years, you wanted to have a book, and you have to endure not having a book, right? That you wanted to have done.
That's
So
very, very, very helpful.
we have to endure
Yes.
something.
No, seriously. Even just pointing out, you need to endure that. Well, geez, I'm a woman. I can endure anything. I went through labor twice, but just pointing out, you have to endure it. That's important to be able to say, and I am going to endure the discomfort that comes from not helping my friends find an apartment.
Yeah. So I'm going to do one more
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
really good.
even dicier suggestion. And I like trying playful things, and it may not work for everybody, but let's say, since Sharon has shared that like there's a person in her house, maybe a man, who likes to be helped with things, right? And we all like to be helped, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to be helped, right? And if this person is willing to play a little improv game with you, and you could be like, listen, I'm working on this, explain the whole situation, what we talked about in class, and you could be like practicing being at your novel, and have this person call, hey, Sharon, could you get me a cup of tea? I'm really busy right now with the dog, and I'm on the roof, and I'm hanging off of it, and I'm hammering, and I need a cup of tea. And it's all an improv game, right? And you practice like, get it yourself, or like, not right now. And then you could keep upping the ante, and to even have this person come in and like tug at your get a 2-year-old and you're like, come on, help me. It's like, nope, I'm not gonna lock the door. Okay. There's some fun things to play with, but again, this may not work for everybody. Why don't we give me a second to look at the chat? I do want to look at it, and we have about 20 minutes left, and I want to give you the next thing I want to get into is, do you need an editor? Do you need a group? Do you need help with, like, what is it what you need? I'll give you some questions to ask for yourself, but let me look at the chats here and just see. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Loved it. Beautiful, Elizabeth. I find that all the people I'm not helping are thrilled that I'm helping myself by writing my book, because they saw firsthand, as generous as I am, helping others actually did not get me out of the rabbit hole I was in. Let's see. I'm going to read a beautiful quote called Civic Hedonism. It's going to take me just a second to find it. It is something, I don't even have the author's name on it, but I found it in a pamphlet, an anarchist pamphlet. Hedonism. Okay. And I will read it and share it with you guys. Here we go. This helps with that particular issue of, I'll just let it speak for itself. What's good for others is good for us. What's good for others is good for us, since our relationships with them make up the world in which we live. But serving their needs at our own expense would cheat them of our potential as free and happy companions, which is perhaps the best gift we can offer. our, meaning the collective, I guess, our vision of healthy relationships rests on the notion that self versus others, selfish versus selfless, is a false dichotomy, like all dichotomies. Those who preach self-sacrifice for the greater good are still working from the competitive model of individual versus society, as are those who would aspire to an individualist independence. For us, individuals and communities alike are both convergences of threads in the great web of existence, inseparable from one another, corresponding to one another. The freedom and self-determination we cherish are only possible in the context of the culture we create together. Yet in order to contribute to that creation, we must create ourselves individually. Okay, and I'll share that with you all by email as well. So that's been an inspiring quote to me. Okay. Are we good to move on to like, what do I need? Do I need a group? Do I need an editor? What do I need? And I want to fold this into, yes, I do have writing classes at theopening.org, and you can sign up for them or ask me questions about them, and I love to help them and help people, and I do buy groceries like everybody else and have basic expenses. So not being independently wealthy, I do have to charge for some classes, but I want to also today give some cues on, if you don't want to or can't or too busy or whatever, take a course, how you could set up something like that yourself. Okay, many people come to me, or have never met me, or send me an email. It's like, can you edit my book? I don't actually do that ever. I'm very slow. This is just personal. Like, this is something I've learned over myself, and I need that muscle for my own writing. Now, I do refer people to someone for that. Her name is Bridget Lyons, and I can give that to anybody who needs it. But I want to stop first before we get into like, oh, there's a problem with my book, and I want someone to tell me what's wrong with it and how to fix it. I think that just not that I do have people edit my books. I'm not saying that's wrong, but if you go to that first, there's a lot of groupthink that can happen, and you're giving away some very important power that your book might very much need. Is your own personal wisdom on it. So finding somebody, for example, who can coach you to help you discover what you're trying to say, and when you do it well, and help see, and you can do this with just another writer friend, what's really trying to emerge and how you're actually really hitting the mark, even if you're not sure what the mark is yet. Having someone help you define where it's working is going to give you so much energy and will help you edit the book, and will avoid the real problem of someone goes through, and even the most well-intentioned person might say, the names of the streets in San Jose were not that interesting to me. And the person goes to like, I knew it. My book is boring. It's boring. I'm such a boring person. When it's, again, that fine tooth comb, that fine brush, it's like, nope. Street names in San Jose are important to this book because, or, you know what? I'm not that interested in it. Doesn't mean I'm a totally boring writer. So there's something about going to an editor immediately to fix your book. Now, let's say, you're writing about something completely timely, and it's got to come out in the next month, and that might be a good time to go to a professional editor. I have never really been able to recommend anyone except Bridget, because too many people who are editors basically try to make it into their book. They see what they think is wrong, and they think it is wrong, not what they think is wrong, or they don't like, or they, it's too sentimental because they're from New York, or it's too new agey, or it's too this, or it's too that, or it should have more characters, and it should have more descriptions, and it should have raised emotional stakes, or it's too philosophical. Where are the feelings? Or it's like, oh, it's too much feelings. There's a million opinions people have about books. So when you give it away to an editor who is not careful, it's also expensive to go to a professional editor. And I think it should be, because it takes years and years and years of practice and book reading and knowledge of the world to, should be, is kind of a big question, brings in the class issue again. But so let me just say, it can be very expensive to have someone read the entire book. Sometimes that's necessary, but don't go to that first if you're still just trying to figure out what's trying to happen in your book. And again, time, how much time can you put into it is a factor. So then I have broken down, I used to do individual coaching. I don't do that anymore, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I've broken down the two kinds of courses I teach into two different groups. One is based on this book, which is called Writing Open the Mind, and it is free writing. It is really liberating with lots of 45 different exercises. I'm sure you can get this on Amazon for like used for $5. So I'm not trying to sell the book, but there's a lot of exercises in there, and you can do them with groups, or you can do them by yourself. And the idea is to just let many, many parts of yourself flow. So you can write it as a complaining person, and you can write it as an ecstatic person, and this is one exercise. You can write it as an authority and as a newbie, and you can write. And you can figure out which part of you want to write from. You can write with heavy metal music going in the background. You can write with classical etudes or Astor Piazzolla, and that can give different parts of you. So these are just, you can run around the room like a maniac and then do some writing, and that energy in your body can help you. So these are all, I'm going through that really quickly for those of you who've never met me. Sorry, it's a little quick, but there's a lot of ways to unlock your creativity and get things flowing. So when do you need that? Sometimes it's not just at the beginning. So we always think, oh yeah, free writing for the beginning, like just drafting. Yes. But sometimes we get very stuck at the end of the process, and we need some way to break up the ice flow inside of our mind. So I do teach these writing from the subconscious classes. One is called Learn to Love the Writing Process. It's an 8-week class. I don't have anyone on the schedule right now, but I do have this 6-month class, which is 18 sessions of all the different exercises in Writing Open the Mind. So it's more of a deep dive, and that's several people in this room have taken that, and it's a lot of fun. So, but let's say you don't take that class. What are the ways that I'm going to recommend you replicate it yourself? Find some free writing exercises that don't tell you what to write about. So prompts are different than exercises, or I call them experiments. A prompt is like, we're all going to write about grief today, and we're all going to write about the economic system today. We're all going to write about, childhood friend today. If you really just don't know what you want to write about and you want to get going, that's fine, but you tend to write the same way that you always write. So finding a group of people is better in a non-judgmental environment. And I have some videos on my YouTube channel about how to set up a positive culture in your writing group, but giving appreciative inquiry feedback and encouraging people as opposed to telling them what's wrong is a key part of it. And then let me just give you one example of a free writing exercise that you can do, give you enough detail that you can do it. Arrange 5 fragrances. So lavender, or I don't know, Lysol, cigarette ashtray. I know those are hard to come by these days, or eucalyptus leaves, and have them nearby. And then you're writing on your topic, whatever your book is. Michael, I happen to overhear, is writing a food book, so he's writing a new chapter on it, and he picks up the eucalyptus. He crushes the eucalyptus leaves in his hands, in his left hand, and he writes while smelling the eucalyptus. And free write, of course, is keep the pen moving, don't read back, don't scratch out. Keep the pen moving, don't read back, don't scratch out. 3 rules of free writing. He writes for that 10-minute period or 5-minute period with the eucalyptus. Then he picks up the lavender, then he picks up the bottle of vinegar. And, while smelling it, he doesn't write about the vinegar. He writes about his topic, whatever his topic is, while letting that smell infuse his mind. So I think practicing with your mind and your consciousness, it's just like yoga or doing any kind of flexibility exercise. If you never do it, you end up being in a rut. And this will help you solve all kinds of problems in your book. So I say you always need some of that. And then the structure is do a free write, read aloud, get feedback, and repeat. Okay, so what about getting individual coaching? So there are people who do individual coaching. I don't do too much of it anymore. And that's primarily because I found doing coaching every week, and you can, I think, set this up with other people who are not necessarily professional writing teachers, but doing it every week for a certain amount of time, or every other week, setting it up in your group is a way to learn what's working. So I gave Dwayne a couple suggestions on how he might approach the things that he didn't Okay, someone says, Andy, you are a something, and I have to read that. Okay, fucking gem. Okay, so Lolo Pardo says, Andy, you are a fuck. Okay, I'm gonna hold on. I'm reading that here. Okay, so back to Dwayne. Excuse me. Back to Dwayne. Right. So, if those suggestions I gave work, then he will report, or they work partly, and then we'll modify it, or like I couldn't get to it, or then we try something else. So it's sort of like, working again and again over time. I found that rather than having 1 hour sessions every month with people, which is what I used to do, having like 15 to 20 minutes every week over 12 weeks, which is the book completion format, is more helpful. And again, you can set this up with your people. Okay, let me say, if you can get a group of people, try to, exhort them to show up, whatever it is, every week, every other week. Every month's okay, but it's kind of not often really enough that they're really going to show up for 3 months, and because if it starts to peter out, it's a lot of energy to get, okay, reminder tomorrow, oh, I'm kind of busy. Just show up anyway, even if you're busy. So that's one part of the book completion group. Another one is being able to read aloud to each other. And we take notes, we give feedback, and you get feedback from me. But in the case of you're doing this in your own group, there's some principles for not shooting someone down by overanalyzing or explaining or telling them what to do. And then a third part of the book completion group, which I again recommend for you if you want to do this on your own, is setting aside a certain amount of time. We have in book completion group almost 2 hours of quiet writing time. And especially if you're on camera, you're like, oh, I can't just walk away and do these 6 other tasks that I think I need to do. I'm seeing that Dwayne's there working on his manuscript, and Michael's and Susan and Ariana are all sitting there working on their manuscript. I'm going to stick with it. Okay. I could say more, but it is 5 minutes to 8. So I want to stop talking for a second, give a chance for a couple of people to either give some feedback, share with me. I'm going to put a couple of URLs in the chat screen. But I'm going to open it up for questions in a second. But I do want to give a schedule in case anyone is interested, and I can answer questions afterwards. I've got 3 book completion groups happening. We've got Tuesday nights, 5 to 9. Dwayne's in that group starting on the 20th of June. I have a Thursday night group, 5 to 9, which includes all the things I was just talking about. And that is starting on August 3rd. I'm bad with numbers, so let me just be sure I've got that right. Yep, August 3rd, Thursday night, and Friday afternoon, 11 to 3, if afternoons are better to California time, which is on August 4th. And the 6-month deep dive free writing class, I call it the Writing Open Your Mind Intensive, starts on what is it? April, May, June, excuse me. On the 19th of July, and that's 25th of July from 12 to 2:30. So it's an afternoon group, 18 sessions. There's payment plans available, by the way. And then one more that isn't even on the website. I'm going to be doing a dreaming and writing course, which that's the one that's on July 19th. So, that's all at theopening.org. I will send you an email with that. That's the end of our public service announcements. I'd love to have any feedback, pushback, questions to, in the last five minutes or so that someone's feeling impelled to share, ask, or as I said, I welcome objections as well. I think that was Susan. Does your hand just go up there?
Yeah. Organizing a group, I've had bad luck with people who thought they wanted to and then weren't willing to, and so forth. So the organizing of the group really gets in the way of doing the writing. Do you have a list of people, or do you help people find each other who are really committed to, yes, let's do this?
So this is the part of my job part of my work that's called a job. And it is troubling, especially in Northern California. I think it might not be so much. But Susan, you've taken classes with me. I'd love to help you find some people. I know there are some groups that are ongoing on Zoom, and I think there may be even an East Bay group who are, I cannot vouch for their committedness or their showing upness. I find that is a huge problem. And even people who pay money to go to a class sometimes just don't show up. And this is just one of these, like climate change. It's just out there in the world, and I want to change it, but it has its own momentum. I would say to everybody who's listening, if you join a group, try not to be a flake and try to keep showing up and try to keep working through it, and maybe make it a smaller commitment. But yes, it's hard. Then you just try again. I mean, before I taught writing classes, I would be like, writing classes on Wednesday night, come over to my apartment. And I just keep telling people. And sometimes it was just me and one other person. And there would be some nights when nobody showed up. And I could have been like, oh, fuck this, but I didn't. And I just kept doing it. And I kept telling everybody, and I just kept leading it. But then you have to lead it and call people. And it's not writing your book, right? It's actually calling people or emailing them or reminding them and you just have to decide whether that's worth it. I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why the book completion group, I have 3 sessions going at any one time, is because that is, I don't have a real answer for you, but I think just also notice that your own capacity to inspire people, like, this is important. We really want to do this. I want people who really love it. I mean, the word committed is kind of like an explosive word, so it might not be the most successful word. Could be a good word, but it might not be. Just like, I want to be with people who really want to give this a try and are really going to try as much as they can to make every session, and just say that to them and bring that self out of them. Okay. Kathleen has something about the site meetup. Something has it. Okay. I think someone else had a question or a comment or a thing they would like to share with the group. Especially if you haven't spoken much, Jill or James or anyone, or Annalisa, love to hear. Yes, James.
I do. So I noticed that, and this is my first time here, and I thank you so much for offering this. This has really been fantastic for me.
Oh, good.
I'm actually stuck on an island, literally, so I don't get out much. I'm on Angel Island. I live out here in San Francisco Bay. And so I'm writing fiction, and I notice it seems like you are kind of more dedicated to nonfiction. Am I wrong in that, or
no, that's not also correct. Kathleen has finished her fiction book in my class. I mean, there's certain books certain genres that I don't know, like children's books and screenplays are. I really don't know much about it, but I've helped people finish those as well. I think my nonfiction examples have been heavier today, but yes, go ahead with your question though.
Well, no, that was just it. I was just curious if in your courses, if you focus on theme and plot and all of that stuff. And I'm actually I've been more interested in nonfiction, writing nonfiction. And so this is something new that I'm doing. But it is historical fiction. So it has, a lot of what I have training in anyway. So,
okay. Before I answer, Kathleen, would you like to speak to that, since you've written a fiction book in my group better than me talking the whole time?
So my experience, I'm writing fantasy, which, not everyone reads. But what I found was that what Andy was really able to help me with were my personal blocks, which weren't about writing fantasy and weren't about writing fiction. They were kind of about me. As far as the things like plot and so forth, I think one can easily learn that from books. There's so much information about how do those elements of writing work, and what Andy, what you would get from a writing class like Andy's would be more of connection, and also reading, reading what you just wrote aloud and getting spontaneous responses to it. That's the kind of thing you can't get from a craft book.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
James, let me answer that. Thank you, Kathleen. That was great and true. I absolutely, if someone is focused on like character development or plot, I do have some chops in helping people with that, but I don't do it from a prescriptive, like, here, let's use the hero's journey or use the, Hollywood, thing, or like all characters need to have like flaws, but then they're lovable in the end. All of that stuff is just so cookie cutter, and it's really, that's the problem with a lot of those books. So it's really discovering what's trying to emerge through you and what your own skills are, and by listening to your work every week, and listening to other people in the, you start to build that internal skill for what feels right to you. And I think those books are there, and there's a lot of them. I think Chris knows quite a bit of them, Chris Wilcox. And so if people have books they want to recommend, you can do that. I don't tend to read those books because, just give a little example. And if people, it is now a little bit after 8. So I put the mailing list, hold on for a second on the question. The mailing list sign up and a couple of URLs for classes in the chat. And if you're not on my mailing list and you want to find out about these free classes or other resources and YouTube, etc., do go ahead and sign up for that if you want to get another email. But what I want to get back to is those, let's see, what's his name? Music of Chance, Paul Auster. I heard an interview with him, a live interview, and he, published lots of books, and not that that's better than anybody else, but he's like, I was a literature student who raised her hand or his hand in the lecture. It's like, well, I noticed your books don't have any descriptions of the rooms or the places or the environments that any of your characters in. I've read 6 of them, none of them had it. And Paul is just like, yeah, I hate books like that. Like, really? You hate books like that? And he's like, yeah, when someone says living room, I want them to stop, because I want it to be in the living room that I grew up in. So I want it to be that, right? So there are a lot of books that say, you need to do characters this way, or you need to have a certain amount of concrete specific details. But Paul Auster's books don't have a lot of descriptions of the rooms that people are in, but there are lots of books that will tell you that that's necessary. If you were to go down a checklist of all the things that are like important for good fiction, changes every 10 years or less, then you'll have you'll have a book that's just so full of like checklists, it'll be unwieldy. It won't do what you want fiction to do. And what you want fiction to do might be different than what Chris wants fiction to do. And Chris mentioned that she does historical fiction. So if the two of you want to share emails with each other, you can do that. Okay, it's 5 after 8 right now. I am going to hang around for as long as the last person is hanging around and answer questions. I will say that the book completion group on Tuesday nights on the 20th of June is open. There are still some spaces in it. If you want to send me an email with questions, if you want to hang out and ask me questions now, if you want to grab a space, that's all can be done on the website. Okay. So this was great. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now. And anyone who